From late rent to smoking indoors, there are a ton of reasons that you might need to evict a tenant, and it's no different in the state of Delaware. But when are you within your rights to do an eviction? And more importantly, how do you make sure you don't create more legal trouble for yourself in the process? If you're worried about questions like these, take a deep breath and keep watching to learn everything you need to know to evict a tenant in Delaware. But before we get into that, we need to mention upfront that we're not lawyers. It's important to do your own research on the subject before making any final decisions. With all that said, let's get into it. Let's start with the first thing you need to know about the eviction process in Delaware. Landlords in Delaware can evict tenants for multiple reasons, and the type of notices that they need to provide can vary based on legal justifications for the eviction. We'll go through each of these now to help you figure out whether your planned eviction is valid and what you need to do to keep it that way. If one of your tenants doesn't pay their rent on time, then that may be a reason to evict them. Delaware law says that a failure to pay rent violates the residential landlord-tenant code, and rent is considered late if it's a day past its due date. But you may have a longer grace period written in your lease, so be sure to check. If you want to evict a tenant for non-payment of rent, you need to first serve them with a 5-day notice to pay. This notice basically says you have 5 days to pay, or we're beginning eviction proceedings. So either the tenant does pay and you won't begin the proceedings, or they don't and you're free to file eviction paperwork with the court system. You can also evict a tenant for violating lease agreements with them, even if they're still paying on time. This can include things like damaging the rental unit, smoking in non-smoking areas, and keeping pets in pet-free units. If this is your justification for the eviction, you need to issue a 7-day notice to remedy. This gives the tenant 7 days to fix the violation. If they haven't resolved the issue after the notice period is complete, then you can begin eviction. Another thing to note is that if the tenant resolves the issue once in the past, but then commits the same violation again, you can end their tenancy immediately as a landlord. In that case, all you have to do is give a 7-day unconditional quit notice to vacate the premises. For example, someone might pretend to get rid of their pet after you issue the first notice. But if you found out that they had their pet in their unit again after that, you can immediately move to end the tenancy instead of submitting another notice. You can also evict a tenant for conducting illegal activity within the rental unit. In this situation, you don't have to provide any written notice. You can file the complaint paperwork with the court system right away. This kind of eviction can stem from things like property theft or any other crimes that may put other tenants or the property at risk, such as arson. And finally, landlords in Delaware have the option of not renewing a lease when it expires naturally. But in order to do this legally, you must first issue your tenant a 60-day written notice of eviction that coincides with the conclusion of the lease. So we've covered all the reasons why you can evict a tenant in Delaware legally. Let's look at how you actually do it. We'll go step by step, starting with your first eviction task, which is filing a complaint. If you've fulfilled your legal notice requirements and the tenant hasn't fixed the issue, then your next step is to file a complaint with the court. This involves going to the Justice of Peace website, filing the complaint paperwork, and paying the appropriate fees. There are plenty of online templates that you can find if you need help drafting these documents. Just make sure you get yours from a reputable site to avoid experiencing any issues in your case. One option is to have a court official deliver the complaint documents to the tenant in person. If that doesn't work, you can serve notice to another adult who lives with the tenant. And if neither of those options are working for you, then you can post the documents in a secure and visible position by the entrance of the tenant's unit, and also mail them a copy via first-class certified mail. Once you've served notice, you can schedule a court date online. While waiting for the court date to arrive, you'll want to prepare and file a motion to reobtain legal possession of the unit from the tenant. First, the tenant may not show up to the court date or respond to your legal allegations of a lease violation in any meaningful way. In that case, you'll win the court case by default. Congratulations. The other option is that the tenant could argue with you about the eviction. In this situation, you'll need to back up your claims with evidence. This can be in the form of leases, payment records, witnesses, photos and videos, and any other type of proof that you can provide. If you win the court case, then your tenant will get a writ of possession 10 days after. At this point, a tenant must move out within 24 hours of receiving the notice. If the tenant still hasn't moved out, a constable will be able to come to your property and physically remove the tenant. Keep in mind that even if you win the case, you can't physically remove the tenant yourself. Alright, so there's obviously a ton of steps involved when it comes to evicting a tenant in Delaware, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need an attorney. There are a ton of resources like this that are designed to get you through the eviction process without having to pay a lawyer. With that said, evictions can be complicated. If you miss a step or complete one in the wrong way, you would have to start the process from the beginning, which means lost time and money, the very thing you're trying to avoid. If you want to make sure that that doesn't happen, then it's never a bad idea to hire an experienced housing attorney who can process your eviction claim on your behalf. Just know that it is possible to do this on your own as well if you're looking to save some money there. One last point that we should touch on is the idea of keeping evidence. As a landlord, it's important to hang on to things like payment records, lease agreements, messages from tenants, and maintenance records. The more records you have, the easier it will be to prove your case if you need to process an eviction in court. Property management software like DoorLoop is the easiest way to keep all of this information stored. And the reason for that is that it's a single platform that automatically saves everything from lease agreements and payments to tenant messages and maintenance requests. With a property management software, you automatically keep all the evidence you need to give yourself the best chance of winning your case. If that's something that interests you, you can sign up for your free demo at doorloop.com. Now let's finish up with some of the frequently asked questions about the eviction process in Delaware. And to our knowledge, there are 3 that frequently come up. The first one is, how long does it take to evict a tenant in Delaware? It can take anywhere between 1 to 3 months to evict a tenant in the state of Delaware. This depends on how quickly you're able to get a court date, whether the tenant fights the eviction, and the kind of notice you need to provide. You may also be wondering if you can force your tenant to move out. No, absolutely not. You should never try to take matters into your own hands. Landlords that try these so-called self-help evictions can and often are sued by the tenants that they're trying to evict, which is the last thing that you're trying to have happen. And finally, what are the penalties for a self-help eviction in Delaware? In this state, your penalties can involve the tenant's court costs and attorney fees, and any charges they faced while finding a new place to stay. It can be very expensive for the landlord, and it's best to avoid these type of evictions altogether. So there you have it. We hope you found this video helpful, and if you're struggling with an eviction in Delaware, then make sure to do your own research beyond what you learned in this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos just like this, and we'll see you soon in the next one.